Season premiere as a power failure stretches everyone's patience to the limit. Look for the light at the top of the hill tomorrow. Hill Street Blues season premiere, 10 p.m. tomorrow.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
It's out of this world. It's the 18th anniversary sale, Wednesday through Saturday at Richmond Square. Friday night till midnight, don't miss Lunar Lunacy with hourly spot specials. Meet Mikey the Robot, hear the Mulberry Street Jazz Band, and enter to win a trip for two to Reno from Marlins Travel and CP Air Holidays. It's extraterrestrial fun. Lunar Lunacy, Friday night till midnight during the 18th anniversary sale at Richmond Square, number 3 Road, a half block south of Westminster Highway.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Good morning. The social credit steamroller plods along. Closure times 8 last night. And to bring us up to date on democracy in action in Victoria, did I say democracy? We're going to have Clem Chapple live from the Legislature this morning. And then I have in the studio the one and only Toni Onley. And have I got news for Toni Onley? I knew it before he did, on his problems with the all-encompassing octopus of Revenue Canada, who appeared to be going after the big-name artists. And then to add a piece of light humour to our programme this morning, I've got 3 men of the cloth. Father Jim Roberts, Jim Roberts, and Bob Smith and Val Anderson of the United Church, just to see how revolutionary these men of the cloth really are. But first, to Victoria after the break and Clem Chapple. Clem, old friend, how many times did they use closure last night?
They used closure 8 times, unless they've done it since I came down to the studio, Jack.
Could have been 10 times for all you know now, because you've been out of the studio for half an hour.
Well, they started to go really quickly. At one point, they had 2 within 20 minutes, and then at 7:31 and at 8:05, so it could easily be 1 by then.
Now, we're on Bill 3. This is the key bill which affects the future, the compensation, the arbitrary separation of God knows how many thousand civil servants under the Public Sector Restraint Act. Is that correct?
That's right, on third committee stage, where they bring in every little detail, and they discuss every little detail, and they bring in amendments, and they can, well, they had also 35 divisions, Jack. That's how many sort of specific decisions they have to make. Divisions meaning a vote where everybody has to come out of their rooms and come up and vote in the legislature.
How much are they giving for each section? How much time?
Time, well, we've only gone through, once again, since I came down here, about 4.5 out of 10 sections in 16 hours.
So that means there must be an all day and all night sitting tonight to get Bill 3 passed so that Bennett can ride into the Social Credit Convention having kept his promise on total restraint.
On his most notorious bill, yeah. They could fold a little more quickly, you know. The rancor has gone out of this place overnight. It's mostly jovial, and there's been nobody screaming in the hallways and nobody kicked out.
They're suffering from sleep deprivation?
Yes, I'm sure they are.
And nobody has been tossed out of the legislature?
No, there was one sort of vague attempt by Frank Howard, but somebody moved closure and kind of took the wind out of his sails, and he just kind of walked off, didn't mind.
How about Waterland's cuddly bear? Was it in the house last night?
No, he has a little one on his lapel, but even he is behaving himself these days.
He stopped carrying his cuddly bear into the legislature.
Yes.
So we now have a soporific legislature where they're sitting around and making feeble gestures, feebly fighting little bits and pieces, and then a backbencher gets up and says that the question now be put.
And no one seems to complain when it is put.
Has there been a deal made?
Oh, I don't know about the deal. I don't know about the deal yet. They're not saying anything. There's only rumor, and it really doesn't amount to anything more than rumor.
We're talking about the deal whereby Davidson's obviously anxious to get Barrett back into the legislature.
He dragged the two House leaders into the out of the legislature into his office to talk, and they've had 3 sessions. Now, we don't know if that was kind of struck beforehand, or Davidson decided that he was going to make them write a deal. But there's no details about it yet.
How angry? Well, obviously the NDP are not really even angry about the very restrictive clauses related to separation and recall or no recall in the Bill 3 amendments.
Well, they'll tell you they're angry, and I guess they don't like it and never will like it. But I have to say that they've kind of given up their really tough stance, and they're kind of slogging away at it and being repetitive and almost, I think, being thankful when closure comes in and takes the ball away from them.
Yeah, the opposition is obviously dying on its feet. Clem, what's the schedule for today? More Bill 3?
I think they're going to try and finish up Bill 3, as you said, in order to get it done by the convention, which starts on Thursday and Friday in Vancouver.
And Bill 3 will then be ready for proclamation at the end of the session?
Yeah.
Or can they proclaim it before the end of the session?
You got me there.
I think they probably can if they go up to the Lieutenant Governor and proclaim it and bring it into law right now.
I think they can bring it in right away. They need it by the 31st, of course.
Yes, of course. So therefore, can the session possibly... Oh, the session can easily be over now by October 31st.
Well, it could be, but, this is very slow going. 4 sections in 16 hours, and we have all the estimates to do, Jack. We haven't done any estimates, and there's still a pile of bills. We haven't even touched the Human Rights Amendment Act, the one which cancels the Human Rights Branch and Commission, so...
All right, now here's a question. This is a kind of inside parliamentary question. Not a dime without debate took away the restriction. There used to be 100 and some hours for debates and estimates. There is unlimited debate on the estimates. Am I correct?
There is virtually unlimited debate, yeah.
Bennett will probably bring in closure on the estimates too then. Why not? They're not as important as the bills from his point of view, are they?
Well, let me guess, though, that the NDP's beef is really about the legislation, and once they're beaten on that, I would think that they'd like to go home and have a rest, too.
Are you going to go home and have a rest?
Oh, when I'm allowed. When they do, I will.
When they do. Okay, will you do a little personal chore for me this morning?
Certainly.
Jim Chavot was going to be on the microwave this morning to give me his interpretation of Bill 3 and what it's done, because we've had no proper answers to questions in that bill since the day they were introduced, certainly not in public. Now, he couldn't make it this morning because he was tired. He's going to be in Vancouver for the convention on Friday at the latest. Would you tell Jim, I'm going to try and bribe him, would you tell Jim that I will cancel 3 Liberal cabinet ministers from Ottawa, 3 of them, if he will hie himself over to Vancouver and sit down here and have a reasonable conversation with me for the benefit of every public sector employee in the province on what the hell Bill 3 means.
That sounds like a deal no Socrat could refuse, but, he has been up all night and will be up probably another night and all day today doing Bill 3.
Well, I'm much obliged to Clem Chapple. Go catch 40 winks, but leave your cuddly bear at home. Thanks, Clem. I'm very much obliged to you. Next, Toni Onley. And have I got bad news for Toni Onley after the break. Did you bring a print with you?
Oh, damn, no.
You didn't? Doesn't matter.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Toni Onley is one of Canada's most successful and most famous artists. He's known from coast to coast like butter on toast. And his originals sell for fantastic amounts, and his prints go for a pretty penny. And Onley is in the middle of a fierce battle with the tax department. Do you feel you have been selected and centered as an example to the creative community by which they are going to put you through, Mr. Onley?
Well, it's very easy to form that interpretation, and I believe so, and everybody else around me believes so. Even though Revenue Canada says that they're not choosing me as an example or a test case or anything like that, but it looks pretty obvious to me.
You have a grandiose and extravagant plan to burn 1,000 of your prints at Wreck Beach tomorrow morning. Is that correct?
That's right.
How much are these paintings worth?
There would be, well, there's over 1,000, so it's about $1 million at $1,000 apiece.
$1 million of your inventory.
Right.
Now, can you put to me very succinctly what you regard as the tax department's iniquitous position in your case?
Well, what they're doing in my case, and also all the artists across Canada, if they're successful with me, they will move across Canada and do it, and that is disallow us all our expenses. Disallow us the expenses that go into the production of our work, canvas and stretchers and that sort of thing. In my case, my travel expenses to far off points on the globe are disallowed until I've sold all the work associated with each trip. Then they will allow those expenses. Now, this is a horrendous burden. This is the only capital that an artist has to work with.
Far be it from me to inquire into your personal business, but you've brought it into public view.
Yes.
How much have you charged in expenses in the years, how many years are under review?
2 years.
How much have you charged in expenses in the years under review?
I don't have those figures, but the years under review, well, one of the years I made my big sale, and the year before that I was doing pretty well, actually. So we're looking at the retail value of work sold in 2 years at maybe $1.5 million. So, but my travel expenses couldn't have been any more than about $30,000. Yeah, it's about $30,000.
But you have a Rolls Royce.
Yes, of course I do.
Very expensive, $50,000,
Yes.
$60,000
Yes.
Rolls Royce.
Yes.
Do you have a jet plane?
No, but I have 2 aircraft that I use for flying up to lakes and up to the glaciers to
Do you
paint.
charter these aircraft?
No, I fly them myself.
You own 2 private
Yes,
planes?
I do, yes. Yes.
And therefore, you say that every nickel you spend in every year should be deductible in that year from whatever current income there is.
Well, this is standard practice in every other business that I know of. I don't know of any any sector of Canada where you're not allowed to deduct your expenses as they occur.
But you know as well as I do, and you have a good tax man, Mr. Onley, that there are different kinds of expenses.
Yes.
There are overhead expenses, there are raw material expenses,
Yes.
there are administration and general
Yes.
expenditures.
Yes.
And you know that a businessman cannot take everything off every year on his cost of materials for production. Did you know that?
Well, I know that they have to take certain things into inventory. That's fine. Say you're a clothing manufacturer. At the end of the year, you either take it into inventory or sell it to the Army and Navy for $1. I can't do that with my artwork. No artist can do that.
And how about when you take it into inventory, it becomes an asset, does
Of
it not?
course, yes.
And that changes, if you take everything into inventory, a value, that changes radically your ability to deduct for your expenses.
Yes.
Have you been unreasonable in your expenses? I mean, have you just been too extravagant?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, it's a fraction of my income, my expenses.
Now, have you any indication of what they planned to tax you for this 1,000 prints?
Yes.
Which we'll find about the bonfire in a moment, which you plan to burn tomorrow.
Well, I haven't even gone into the money angle of that at all.
But they're only prints. It couldn't
Yeah.
be that much.
I don't know how much money's involved that I would save in taxes by burning them. Actually, I haven't gone into that.
Now let's you tell the people the bad news. What did Revenue Canada inform you this morning, Mr. Onley?
Well, I was talking to them on the phone just a few minutes ago, and they said that by burning my prints, it would make absolutely no difference to the years under review.
The official statement, which I got too, was, in our opinion, says Revenue Canada,
Yes.
the burning of the prints by Onley will not affect your assessment for the years under review.
Exactly.
In other words, they've told you bluntly and publicly this morning, after telling you and issuing a statement, you can burn your prints and
It
go,
won't make any
and
difference.
go to hell. You're still going to
Yes.
pay the taxes on your
Yes.
burned prints.
That's right.
How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel extremely sad and extremely disappointed in the government that they would take this attitude. First of all, they tell me if I'm to claim my expenses on these works, they have to be destroyed. I mean, they tell me that across the table, that the works have to be destroyed so that I can claim my expenses within the year. And now they tell me that they're not even going to allow me that credit with the work that I'm burning, which includes a lot of work in the years under review, 80 and 81. And they tell me they're not even, it's not going to make any difference to my assessment in those years. You know, things are worse than I thought.
They've told you across the table in the first case that if you did burn them, you'd still be taxed.
Yes.
And they've now made a public statement that if you do burn them, it will not change your current assessment.
They're turning me into a martyr. I mean, what I'm trying to do is to stop Revenue Canada taxing artists across the country as manufacturers. We're not manufacturers. That is the point I'm trying to get
But
over.
you should pay tax on everything you sell in any given year.
I'm in the top 2% of the country. I don't doubt that, you know, and I certainly pay my taxes. And you know, when I earn the money, they're welcome to it.
You're not required to answer this question. What is the additional assessment you face on these 1,000 prints which you value at the sellable price of $100 a print, $1 million?
Oh, I really don't know what that assessment
Well,
would
I
be.
don't blame you for telling me.
No, honestly, I don't know, Jack, because I haven't even looked, you know, I can't read a balance sheet.
But if they did assess you on $1 million worth of
Yeah.
paintings,
Yeah.
that would nick you, wouldn't it?
Well, of course it would.
And now, having been given this information officially this morning, are you now going to chicken out and not burn your prints?
Well, how can I? I mean, I am trying to make a statement.
And your statement is that even although they have announced publicly this morning that if you burn their prints, they'll tax you anyway on the
Yes.
years under review, are you still going to burn the painting?
Of course I am. I mean, this issue is much bigger than me, Jack, and I've been trying to tell everybody that right from the very beginning. I'm not complaining about my taxes. I'm complaining about the way artists are taxed from coast to coast in Canada.
But it's only the big boys like you that really suffer.
No, it's not. It's the little fellow.
If I'm a little artist selling things in 1 year and getting rid of most of my stock, I've deduct my expenses and live on a balance.
Listen, 80% of the artists in Canada earn less than $9,000 a year, and they don't sell their work like I do. They're not allowed to deduct their expenses as they go along. They're treated as amateurs. They're not allowed to deduct any of their expenses. They have to finance what they're doing out of their own pockets. The man who drove me out here in a cab is an artist who's financing his art out of driving a taxi cab, and there are thousands like that across Canada.
And you want to establish the principle that when a man becomes an artist, well, you've got to surely set a standard for what is an artist.
Yes, you do. You do.
I mean, he must be a successful artist,
Right.
surely, to
Yeah.
deduct as he goes on anything.
That's right. And a friend of mine just lost his appeal, who is a very successful artist who's received a couple of Canada Council grants, who is a professor of art at a college in Alberta, and they would not allow him to deduct his expenses. I mean, it was well established that he was a practicing artist. He was not allowed to deduct his expenses. He appealed it and he lost the appeal.
When are you going to pour champagne at the burning? No. You wanted evening dress. At Wreck Beach. What time tomorrow?
It's in the morning, actually. It's tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning.
At 10 o'clock at Wreck Beach, and everybody's invited.
You don't have to be naked.
Of course you don't have to be naked. I might take off my shirt and throw it into the fire when it's all done and do a Reginald Perrin and walk into the ocean. I really don't know, but I'm mad enough now to do anything.
More with Toni Onley. And your calls too, after the break. I can't pretend to understand the intricacies of this entire Toni Onley Revenue Canada battle, but it seems to be a question of what are reasonable expenses for a year's operation of a professional artist. He wants to write everything off right now. They'd say no. When you've got inventory stock, even if it is the creation of art, you must transfer some of your assets and tax liabilities and expenses to the years ahead.
Right.
And I got it right.
Yes, you have, until the work is sold.
Now, what about donating these prints? Am I sneering at prints?
No, I mean,
What about donating these prints, which you would say would sell for how much?
yes, well, $1 million. If
$1 million.
they put on the market. Yeah. Well,
To charity.
Exactly. Well, there's another wrinkle. You can only give 20% of your income to charity, and then it's taxable in your hands after that. And my wife and I have already given more than 20% of our annual income last year.
To charity?
To charity,
To
yes.
tax-deductible charities in this country?
Yes.
What about this hospital you're building in India? That can't be tax-deductible in Canada, can it?
Yes, well, that's the Canada-India Village Aid Association, which I'm on the board, and that's where I'm channeling this money.
And that makes it deductible for 20% of your income. So
Yes.
20% of your income is, the maximum is $100,000 charitable deductions. Is it?
20% of your income, I understand.
How much did you give?
$100,000.
$100,000. So you made $1 million.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't, Jack. That's the problem.
20% is 100,000.
Yes.
5 times
Yes.
100,000 is
$500,000.
$500,000. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's right.
I
no.
do apologize. But you are going to burn them.
Well, I have no alternative because
You're not going to chicken out.
I can't. I mean, what we're trying to do here is establish a principle.
Mind you, you've still got the basic, the originals for the prints, and you can reprint them in the years ahead.
No. This is my past. And they are original prints. There are no originals. They're not copies of anything. They're originals in themselves.
I see. I don't understand that. Now, next question. From a listener, I suspect. I'm trying to provoke you. You're quite calm this morning.
When I get mad, I get quieter and quieter.
Go ahead to Toni Onley.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Perhaps a little background at this time, Mr. Onley. I'm wondering how long have artists been able to deduct
Well, right up.
expenses in the way that you have been used to doing?
Yes, well, right up until now.
Well, I mean, is this back several years or?
Well, I suppose back as far as you can go, they could open up
Not
the
back
files.
to the masters and that, I don't suppose. But is it possibly that they're trying to get a handle on just how much art is being sold?
I don't know
There's
what.
a lot been sold under the table and there's been no tax declared. Now, I'm not suggesting you've been doing that,
Well,
but
no.
you're very high profile.
No, I think your point, surely, Toni Onley, is that they seem to be trying to... They didn't expect publicity when they gave you the assessment, did they?
Well, no, they didn't. I mean, they've done this quietly to a number of artists across Canada. And now that I've brought this out into the open, other artists have come forward and says, well, they've been doing this to me for the last few years. And I was absolutely shocked. I mean, high-profile artists, you know, who, one artist said, look, I'm too old to fight this. The torch has been handed to you, you know, and that's when I got the idea to torch the painting.
Do you have an association of artists who are dickering or talking to Revenue Canada?
Right. There's the Canadian Artists Representation in Ottawa. There's the Canadian Conference of the Arts, and they've been working. I've spoilt their weekend for them. They've been working all weekend in Ottawa on this.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, the point I wanted to make was literary and musical compositions. Aren't they considered art? And does this mean that novelists are taxed for unpublished works?
If they're successful with me, they can go directly to the novelist. It would be very, very easy. If you have some unsold short stories in your drawer and they're not published, they could disallow you all your expenses that have gone into that, particularly if you had to travel. They could disallow all your expenses until that was published. You had received all the royalties, and then the book had been remaindered. Then you could claim or try to deduct your expenses that went into that book.
But to make deductions at all, you must have an income in the first place.
In the first place.
So therefore, if you just get a bunch of unsold novels or
Yeah.
garbage in your drawer, pinned you,
Right.
well, they can't touch you on that. in any way,
Well,
shape, or
this is
form.
what I'm saying they could. Because I have a lot of unsold stuff in my drawers, and that's what they're going after.
It seems to me that they are, in a way, treating you like a manufacturer. And a manufacturer
Exactly.
has, in fact, to transfer some of his expenses to future years against his assets on his stock.
Yes, yes.
And that's what they want to do with you.
Well, they're using manufacturers' legislation in
Perhaps
my
with
case.
big-time people like you, it's fair. It
Well,
could be fair.
No, it's not fair at all. It's absolutely not fair because it cuts right across the board to the poor artist as well as the artist.
Go
that,
ahead to Toni
make
Onley.
money.
Yeah, good morning, Jack. Good morning, Tony.
Come on
I
in.
sympathize with you in a way. My father back in the East is an artist, too. But I was just wondering, even though you're going to burn your paintings tomorrow at Red Beach,
Yes.
is that going to include your 83 inventory, too?
Yes, it's going to include the inventory that's under review. This is what, the years that are under review. I mean, this is what depresses me. Now they tell me it's going to make absolutely no difference to those years under review.
Yeah,
After they told me to burn the works in order to claim my expenses for those years under review, now they tell me it's not going to make any difference.
No, you didn't make that clear to me. You were first told across the table by the tax department that if you burned them,
Yeah.
you could claim the expenses.
Yes, originally.
And now, in the statement this
Yeah.
morning, they say that, in their opinion, the burning of the prints will not affect the assessments for the years under review.
Yes.
So you say they have changed their mind.
No, they're changing their tune. Now I don't know what they mean.
Now they mean that no matter what you do, they're going to stick to their assessment, which they made, disallowing many of your expenses.
Of course. And all the artists across Canada disallowing their expenses.
And did you tell me your expenses were only for a year 30,000?
It would be approximately that for traveling.
You don't use it for joyriding? Pretend I'm a tax man.
This is the problem, you see. The taxation system is based in Canada on the pain and pleasure principle. I enjoy what I do, so I can't divide my life into pain and pleasure. I enjoy painting. And they say, don't you ever take a holiday? When I take a holiday, I take my paints. My life is a holiday.
Except for the tax department.
Except for the tax department.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Mr. Onley, I wanted to emphasize this point about manufacturing. It seems clear to me that no artist, by definition, can be considered a manufacturer. And I was wondering if you had time, or your friends, artist friends at any time, to research, is there any other Western country that treats its artists in this way in terms of taxation, for taxation purposes?
Well, none that I know of. None. I mean, if you go to Ireland, of course, you don't pay any taxes if you're an artist.
You don't pay any at all?
No, not in Ireland you don't, no.
So maybe you might move to Ireland?
There's a basic inconsistency. I should point out here that you can import art into Canada duty-free because the customs do not consider it a manufactured object. And also our Cultural Review, Cultural Properties Act prevents you from shipping work of significant cultural value to Canada out of the country.
Well, it seems to me that, I mean, there's a number of grounds here, that ground alone, that you could appeal this in the courts.
You will appeal it, of course.
Well, of course I will.
Courts would obviously tell the government they're crazy.
Well, I've done that. I'm trying to change their minds and get them to stop taxing artists across the country as manufacturers, first of all.
Well,
that is the first thing that I have to do. Then finally I'll go to court on this, and I'll have to fight it there. Of course, we can't comment on it once it's in court.
No, of course you can't. But the fact seems to be that they take your print industry on the side and they say, that's where he's a manufacturer.
Right.
That's what they're doing.
They're saying I'm a manufacturer.
Maybe that's not unfair.
It's totally unfair.
Okay, another segment with Toni Onley. What time's the burning tomorrow? 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock in the morning.
If you did it at 9, we could cover it live. After the break. Is it Onley or Only?
Only.
I was wrong. Second time in my life. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like just to make a comment on the overall tax picture. This thing is a lot bigger than just artists or individual people. The tax department in Ottawa has really embarked on these retroactive tax measures that are purposely couched in fuzzy tax laws to actually extort money off people that originally thought they were in the clear. And it's not only artists that they're doing this to, and the thing that Tony doesn't realize yet is the reason they probably told him that burning that is not going to matter is that what they want to do is charge a penalty and interest on what he hasn't paid, the tax that he obviously hasn't made yet. They wanted to get a penalty on him for that also.
Okay, does that make sense to you at all?
Not agree. I don't understand all the legal implications of this, but it's quite possible what he's saying is true.
Well, there's certainly being much tougher in collection these days because revenues are way down and they're very quick now, and you can hardly blame them because somebody's got to pay the bills somewhere, I suppose. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Jack, Tony. I'd like to bring this to public's view. First of all, art supplies have always been traditionally very, very expensive. We pay tax on the pigments, we pay tax on the canvas, we pay tax on the brushes, and for most artists, for the time that you spend on a painting, even when you do sell it, you never get back what it's worth. To tax an artist for the work he does is purely ridiculous. If it comes down to it, I would think, Tony, that instead of burning it, If it comes down to it, the stuff that I've been doing, I'll put it on exhibit somewhere to the public for free.
Well, does that make any difference?
No,
That wouldn't make any difference at all, would it?
No, but I mean, what this gentleman was saying does make a great deal of sense, because the artist is the greatest subsidizer of the arts in Canada. I mean, this was brought out in the Applebaum Bear report, that the artist subsidizes the arts. I mean, he earns an average of $9,000 a year. He puts another $5,000 of his own money into that. He is subsidizing the arts of Canada.
Mind you, I want to see you pay your fair share of taxes.
I do, Jack, believe me.
But I'm talking about art in general.
Right.
I object to seeing people getting a $10,000 grant for Canada Council and it becomes a bestseller. Then I say to the author, as I did one occasion, you're going to give that $10,000 back to Canada Council? He says, no way.
Yeah. Well, they've got more than their share back from my early Canada Council in taxes.
Yes, in taxes. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Dr. Webster and Toni. Nice to see you. I think the man ahead of me said part of what I wanted to say. That is that about 80% of the artists across Canada are actually amateurs. We don't make a living out of our art. I think this is true, Toni, of 85% of the artists in the United States as well. But as the gentleman said, we pay tax at the retail level on our canvas, our stretchers, our covering on it, our terps, our copal painting medium, all of the chemicals that go along with brushes and knives and paints of various kinds. We have to have oil.
Ma'am, we can understand that.
Gouache.
Do you express, you'll go on forever, my dear. Do you express total support for Toni or not?
I express 200% of my support for Toni, and artists are not manufacturers. We are artists.
Thank you. Go ahead from Victoria.
Yes, I'm most concerned that the tax department has let it come to this. I feel very, very sorry for the man. And all I have to say is the next cocktail party in Moscow or Paris, it'll be very interesting for the Canadians to have to face the question, is it true that your artists are forced to burn their works? I feel that is an international scandal, almost. And the other thing I feel is that the tax department only go after the weakest, least defended people. If there was a big corporate tax lawyer involved here, I'm sure that the prince wouldn't be...
I cannot regard Mr. Onley as one of the weakest people to defend himself. Are you an artist, caller?
No, I'm a scientist, but I have a lot of sympathy when I see so much work jeopardized by a mindless bureaucracy, and that's all you can say about this. Obviously, there are sensible people in that capital of ours.
Thank you, sir. Matter of fact, will your legal expenses be deductible in fighting the tax department? I don't know the answer to that.
No, they're not. Jack Shadbolt spent $30,000, which he never got back.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. Good morning.
Morning.
Again. Now, perhaps your success is drawing the attention to all artists and how they function in the tax way, and then more specifically, when you received that large sum of money for that large sale that you made some time ago, how did you dispose of that money? Did you possibly move it offshore or do something that annoyed the tax people, and they in effect said, we're going to have a look at you very closely?
No, I paid my taxes. I bought a Rolls Royce and a house, and now I'm broke.
Yeah, but we're talking 800,000 or something. Didn't you get, or 900,000?
Yeah, yes.
Well,
this is
more than the rolls.
this is not the issue we're talking
you
about.
You haven't had any tax problems in the past.
No.
I'm not trying to belittle you. I just want you should straighten that out. That you have had a good tax-paying record up till now.
Yes, I have. Yes. We're not talking. We're talking about the method of taxation
vendetta,
here.
you know.
Hey?
I'd say they do conduct vendettas.
Yeah.
Tax people.
Yes.
Right, that's why I'm always very nice to the tax department. Oh, that was the big sale you made to the future Premier of British Columbia. The man who wants to be the future Premier of British Columbia.
Who's that?
Peter Brown.
Oh, no. That was one sale. That was another one.
That was another one.
Yes, that was another one.
Peter, why don't you come on one day and announce your intentions to become Premier of BC? The only way I can get through to people these days is by asking them on the television. Maybe I've got body odor. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Webster. Mr. Onley, I would like to offer to you another proposal, and that would be simply to withhold the payment of taxes until such time as the matter is resolved. I think in that way you're able to make the statement that you're wanting to make.
Well, that's a good idea, but they just take it out of your bank account.
Well, there are other methods. I would offer this to you, sir. I'm quite confident that the tax people are listening this morning. I am one individual that had a running battle with them for 3 years, and I have not even filed since 1975.
They'll catch you.
Well, I'm quite prepared to meet with them.
And I don't like
I
that.
offer that to you, sir, on this basis, that you have beautiful works of art. It would be such a shame to see it destroyed. I would simply withhold the payment of taxes until such time as the matter is resolved. I would love to see you do it.
I'm trying to get a smoke signal down to Ottawa.
Well, a smoke signal would be one thing, sir, but you're destroying some beautiful, beautiful work, and it would be just an absolute shame. I offer that to you as an alternative idea. Just stop paying taxes, completely stop, and you'll get action. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Onley, I think that what you're expressing, of course, covers a great many types of work. This is only, as you say, a tip of an iceberg. But I do think, Mr. Webster, you must agree that of all the Western powers, this is the essence, the very essence of lack of productivity in any area. I mean, Canada is really down the tube as far as export imports. He was screaming about it, and yet really, this is the very reason. I mean, people can't start up businesses without a lot of hoo-ha from the tax.
I know. I'm going to leave it there, though. Tony, think about it overnight before you do your running.
Yes.
My advice to you as a, reporter would be, sure, get up again and we'll all burn them. But I don't know.
Well, I was very, very depressed when I was delighted when I saw the opposition members get up in the House yesterday.
John Fraser.
John Fraser. I mean, he's got my vote. I mean, he came on like gangbusters. He was great, but I was very, very disappointed in Francis Fox's reply. You see, Francis Fox came outside of the House and he said, well, there's a lot of confusion going on here. We do not tax artists on unsold works. That is not the issue, Jack. That's not what I'm talking about. There's no confusion. Now, I've written him a long letter explaining in detail what the issue is. Now, he knows what the issue is. They are trying to create confusion around this.
The issue is the deduction of expenses expended in 1 year and that year.
Exactly.
And not the transfer, you say, to manufacturers type stock.
That's
right.
But
no matter what Fox said, he obviously didn't know much of what he was talking about, because you and I both got the statement this morning from the tax department which said quite clearly that in Revenue Canada's opinion, if you burn the prints as threatened, it will not affect the assessment which has been determined against Toni Onley for the years under review.
They're turning me into a martyr. I mean, what can I do? What can I do?
At least you can afford to be a martyr.
Well, somebody's got to do it, Jack, and I've been picked.
Okay, it's on. 10 o'clock tomorrow, unless Tony countermands his own decision, but it looks like it's on 10 o'clock tomorrow at Wreck Beach for Onley and live television coverage for Onley of his tax problems. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
I'm grateful for your presence here this morning. Next, I've got three. What was it John Beckett said? Rid me of these troublesome priests. After the break. In my earlier days, men of the cloth were traditionally non-political. They gave their sermons on Sundays, ran their Band of Hopes, their Bible classes, and very seldom, certainly in the Presbyterian Church in Scotland, did any minister take a political position because he was part of the establishment. There have been many changes since then, and today I have with me Father Jim Roberts, who's a teacher at Langara and one of the top men in Solidarity. Reverend Bob Smith of the United Church, Shaughnessy. Gosh, you're right in the heart of the Bloods in Gracie's riding. Am I correct?
You've got it.
And Val Anderson of Grace Memorial United Church and the Canadian Ecumenical News, of which you are the editor. Gentlemen, your position is well known, your social position is well known. But in my normal suave manner, can I ask you if I can put a political label on any one of you men of the cloth?
What do you mean by political label?
Are you a socialist?
No, I don't consider myself a socialist. I consider myself a Democrat.
You?
And my heart is slightly to the left of center, where God and nature apparently intended it to be, and I would regard any other position as pathological.
And you?
I'm a member of the Liberal Party.
You're a member of the Liberal Party?
That's right.
But what kind of reactions do you, particularly in Shaughnessy, get from being a left-of-centre minister who will complain, I am sure, about the policies of the social credit government in Victoria?
I get fair hearing, I think, from the people in Shaughnessy, and I don't think I mute my voice, and I don't think they would expect me to mute it.
Before I come to the Solidarity official member spokesman, what do you think of the Bennett legislation in relation to cuts and their social consequences?
I would say that I have a mixed opinion. Generally, I would support the Solidarity position, but I do not agree with the assumption that there should be no cuts in government. Every one of us has experienced the bloated nature of the bureaucracy, and every one of us would agree that there is, especially in a time of real suffering, that there should be some cutback in government services.
Now I'll come to you, and I want you to give me your outspoken opinion as a spokesman for Solidarity of the conduct of the government in Victoria.
We think it's a desperately bad conduct. We believe that it's putting, in effect, profits before people. It's savaging the weakest and most dependent people in our society to the advantage of those people who have more money and who are more outspoken.
What irks you most, or what upsets you most?
What upsets me most, I think, in the long run, is the loss of so many of our democratic freedoms, the centralizing of power in Victoria. In meeting just recently with Premier Bennett in his office, I told him, Mr. Premier, you are downsizing government quantitatively, you are reducing bodies, and that may be a good thing to do. I agree with Bob here. But what you're doing is you're increasing government. You're giving us bigger government qualitatively because you are centralizing many democratic powers in Victoria, and I think that's wrong. So that's in the long term. In the short term, I believe that we're hurting the pensioners, the handicapped people, that infamy of the community involvement government, taking $50 lousy from the mentally and physically handicapped and otherwise officially unemployable people. The government classifies these people as unemployable, and we take that lousy $50, of which the federal government contributes $25 from their pockets, and I think that's evil.
I think it's shameful myself. I really think it's quite abominable. Now you, sir, you're a very prestigious church in Vancouver, Grace Memorial United Church. Do you think that enough of your brethren in the cloth would join you in your protests? Or are ministers largely still very calm members of the establishment?
They're like the cross-section of the people. You have some that certainly will join in protesting the actions and are already doing that. You have others who sit in the middle wondering the best way to move, and you others who sit and say, no, the status quo is the best place to be and we should deal with individuals.
Do you give guidance from the pulpit?
Oh, yes.
For instance, would you tell them that they should rise up and protest the anti-democratic measures of the social credit government of Victoria or the Liberal government in Ottawa?
I've told them in my articles in Ecumenical News, which are public, that I think all three political parties in this province need to re-examine their act, that all three of them are together causing the situation. And so I've decided to become more active.
Have you come to a decision yet as to whether or not, I've got to deal with simplicities because I'm a simple-minded person, whether the time is coming near for civil disobedience?
I believe that some of our people have arrived at that position, and I respect that position. I myself have not come to that understanding yet. I think there are many avenues of dialogue and consultation, which we've had a recent example of with the Premier, that are open to us, more or less successful. But I respect the opposite opinion, just as my church in general respects civil disobedience, and many of the Christian and non-Christian churches respect that as a reasonably last resort.
And you, Bob?
Well, I'm certainly not at the point of civil disobedience, Jack. But I believe that there has to be everything short of civil disobedience at this point to fight, in particular, the decimation of the human rights branch and the whole support structure for people who are hurting in society. And I believe that the church has to be exactly there, on the side of the people who are suffering. There are all kinds of egregious examples of the misuse of government services, but there are all kinds of instances of people who are genuinely hurting and who are hurting much worse as a result of the government's actions.
It's just you regard them as an incompetent government.
I regard them as an insensitive government.
Would you go as far as?
Oh yes, I would say definitely incompetent because they have not consulted. Now you know, Jack, that the national leaders of the Anglican and the United Churches and the Lutheran and the Canadian Council of Churches and the Disciples of Christ have written an open letter to Premier Bennett saying that he has opened his government to a charge of dishonesty in not revealing to the people of British Columbia substantially, what he had in mind before the election of May 5th.
Well,
That's
he certainly
a very
did
big
not.
charge. Well, all right, then I think you must simply call it at least incompetence in that regard.
Or deliberate manipulation, perhaps.
You're escalating the rhetoric, and I could go along with it.
I'm trying to get you to escalate. It's a tricky one, you see. We've got a liberal, a left of centre, and a left of centre.
Jack, I don't like ups and downs as sideways. I like to speak my mind as I see it on any particular point, but labels are usually libels in my book.
Probably are. More with the men of the cloth, and your calls and questions, please, after the break. You know, for all the years of broadcasting I've been in, I've interviewed many ministers and priests and whatnot. I've never had three together on local issues. But you were picketed in Toronto.
No, Bob was picketed.
Bob was picketed in Toronto. Bob Smith now in Shaughnessy. No, Bob Smith, yes.
Say it right, Jack. Say it right.
Shaughnessy. Why were you picketed in Toronto?
Well, I was picketed because I was taking a public stand on the issue of civil rights for homosexual persons. And that is, in Toronto and in Vancouver as well, an exceedingly difficult subject. And there was a group called Positive Parents that felt that there was no place for such discussions in the life of the church. And so we had pickets and leafleting and all that sort of stuff.
That's a tricky one. That, isn't it?
That's a tough one. But it's one of many tough ones.
I come from the generation which would reflect the parents in protest. How do you take a position on this?
Yes, I do.
I mean, obviously there must be civil rights, not only for homosexual, but for everyone.
That's right.
On a level and even basis. So therefore, surely what you were arguing was an abuse of civil rights in Toronto.
I think that I would say at this point, and I don't think this is really the central focus of our concern here, but I would say that at this point in history, homosexual persons are the equivalent of lepers in Jesus' time. And there's no question about the stance which Jesus took towards people who were outcasts, and it seems to me that there can be no question about the stance which church people today take toward those who are regarded as outcasts.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. You know,
but you don't want to deal with that one, do you?
No, I don't want to deal with that one. I mean, I really don't. I mean, far be it from me to be anything but a total civil libertarian, and those who are most, persecuted need the assistance more than anybody else. But it's not a conduct or a lifestyle which I would in any way encourage at any time. And I believe it has been encouraged in this country by unwise groups. Am I wrong?
I think that there are extreme examples of a particular kind of libertine homosexual lifestyle that are taken by the media as the norm, and it's unfair to the tens of thousands of decent, humane persons who are homosexual through no choice of their own in society today. It categorizes them as...
I might shock you by saying this. I don't give a damn what any adult does in the privacy of their own home as long as they don't frighten the horses in the streets.
Right.
And surely that is a reasonable view for me to take.
Quite so, and I would agree with it.
You would agree with that? Would you too?
Yes, I would, and I would like to say that I follow and read regularly the United Church Observer and the total continuing discussion on this matter, and I think it's a very responsible and theologically astute and courageous stand that they take, and it's unique in the Christian church in Canada.
It is.
It is indeed.
I know what the trouble was in Toronto. It was the abominable behavior of the Toronto City Police battering down the doors of the bathhouses with billy clubs and beating up the inmates.
That was part of the problem.
That was the problem that came to public attention. And, you know, that was just one of those things in Toronto. Now, what about the specifics of our social legislation? Do you agree that somebody has got to suffer in the present restraint?
Well, yeah, even before you get to that legislation, the churches that I minister at started with a food bank. The church was burnt down. as far as we can tell, by arson.
Where?
Grace Memorial United Church, the 3rd of July.
Well, I was away.
And the church was burnt down. And you asked about the cost of taking a stand. Somebody didn't agree with the stands we were taking. So we're trying to rebuild. And that'll have its own complications.
Oh, I'm sorry for my lack of knowledge on that. You had started one of the first food banks.
We had the first depot for the food bank. I'm chairman of the Food Bank Society.
And that was in the...
In Grace Memorial United Church was the first dispensing depot. We had up to 1,100 people every Wednesday.
And how long was it before the place was torched?
6 months.
6 months?
Yeah.
You're sure it was arson?
As far as anybody can tell, it was arson.
You think it was somebody who was politically motivated? Don't know.
Between personal and political motivation, you know, where's the difference?
Yeah.
Somebody angry at what's happening for one reason or another, either angry inside themselves
All right, let me
or angry at the public.
Let me be a pretend social creditor for the moment. Gentlemen, there is no need for food banks in this town. Nobody goes hungry. Everybody surely gets adequate care on the minimum level of human resources, gentlemen.
Not true.
There's the man to tell you. He has the experience.
There's 2,000 bags a week being given out. That's 3,500 people out of 5 different food banks, North Van, Burnaby, and 3 in Vancouver. And that's increasing daily.
Are these the kind of single transients who line up down in Cordova, or are these families who are short of food?
There's some of both. There's families who are short of food. We've talked to the people. There are people who are newly unemployed who never expected to be unemployed in their lives, and who are like casting somebody into the forest who's never been in a forest before. And they just don't know how to cope.
Yeah,
so food's a minor problem for many of them, but a major one that they have to meet with.
Part of the trouble is that this generation behind me, anyway, has had it so easy and so soft and so on. Am I correct?
No, I don't think that. No. I don't think that that's accurate. I think that always people who have acceded to a position of power and influence find it very difficult to give up or to share. There's nothing new about that.
No.
Yes. And they find it very difficult to understand the plight of other people who have far less than they do because they don't associate with those people.
But the general standard of living, gentlemen, since the 40s, I'll be here since 47, has risen 500%, maybe more, in this town.
Oh,
the general level of prosperity and affluence.
But not at the lower end, because the people who are poor are still poor. They're still struggling for education, for health, and they get into that cycle and they're just not able to get out of it. For instance, a family, once they're in the welfare cycle, cannot get out of it because if they start to earn money, it's taken away from them.
I know that. In fact, you do better on, you can't work for the minimum wage and you're worse off if you do than you are if you're in welfare. I'm taking away that $50. Grace McCarthy, mind you, indicated kind of tenuously on this program that they were reconsidering it. I should imagine that if they are, they'll make the announcement before the Social Credit Convention opens on Thursday afternoon to put back the $50.
If I may say, please God, she'll do that.
Well, they've reconsidered part of it, and the ones who had contracts are continuing. But those who did not have contracts, no one knows. And also no one knows how long those contracts will exist. Here today and gone tomorrow.
Do any of you recommend any specific action by the community? I'm not trying to, not trying to provoke you. What do you want people to do about the current situation? I talk about BC. I'm not concerned with anything else this morning.
Well, what
do you want people to do?
What I want, and I've been in 10 cities of the province speaking on behalf of the Solidarity Coalition, is that people submit to the ethical bar of their conscience the measures that are now taking place on the part of the British Columbia government. And the answer, the moral answer that they come up with, that's their business. I have my answer to that, and I'm glad to impress my answer upon them. But every conscientious person must consider these problems as ethical and moral problems. And if they don't, then I think they have incriminated themselves and they are accomplices in the savaging of human rights and people's rights here in the province of British Columbia.
Bob Smith.
Yes, sir.
What do you say
Same
to
question?
That? Yeah. What action do you recommend?
I would hope, along the similar lines, that there would be some kind of serious look at the questions on the part of all people, a recognition that there is an ideological component in the struggle, that it isn't simply a matter of restraint, but that the Bennett government is making a point in cutting out legislation that has structured the whole of the welfare state in the Western world over the last 30, 40 years.
And you include the rentals ones, consumer rights, human rights?
And my guess is that before the next election, a lot of those things will be put back into place. Meanwhile, a lot of people will have been severely damaged in the process. We haven't even touched education, Jack. When you cut $16 million out of the budget of the Vancouver School Board, you affect certainly the community of which I'm a part, which isn't affected by the $50 on the disability allowance. And when we find out what happens to the school system in British Columbia, when we find out what happens to the healthcare system, there are going to be a lot more people screaming, and the government, it seems to me, is going to put back stuff in order to win the next election. But right now they're making a political point. And if we can somehow acknowledge that and deal with it with some kind of realism, then I think we have some way of reducing the time.
Calls to the ministers after the break. Go ahead to my clergyman.
Yes, hello. Jim Roberts?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Richard Clements here. Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to emphasize this possible responses to the government. It seems clear to me that the Bennett government is acting in a totally undemocratic fashion, both in terms of its legislation and in terms of its action in the legislature. I mean, you have 8 closures last night alone. It seems obvious to me that this government will not make any concessions, any major substantive concession in its legislative package. In effect, we now have a dictatorship. And no more talking, no more consultations with this government will in fact work.
What do you want done?
And the response that I'm suggesting is that Solidarity must seriously consider now a strategy for a general strike and massive acts of civil disobedience. Now, they may not win this. It's quite true. Then it may break their back on that. But you cannot sit back and say we're going to put 3 years, we're going to put 3 or 4 years until the next election, and put human rights and democratic freedoms in some kind of limbo, and then hope in the next election that this idiotic government is thrown out, and then bring democratic rights back in.
A question.
That's not the way it works. You just don't put democratic rights away for 3 or 4 years.
Just a minute. You gave your name.
Just 1 minute. I'm suggesting that the ultimate response to Solidarity is to call a massive march on that legislature, tens of thousands of people, and we just shut it down. Shut it down until that government sits back and listens to what we have to say. We'll just go there and we'll camp out on those legislature grounds.
I've got the message.
They will not be able to act.
I've got the message. Now I want the response from each of these 3 gentlemen.
At the moment, today, we are presenting a brief to the Premier and to the province. We still have not lost some small hope. It's a tenuous hope. I agree with you. I agree with your concerns. I agree with your pain. But we're still hoping that the consultative process may bring some substantive amelioration to the chaos into which this present government is leading us. We don't want to talk at this point in terms of a general strike. This, as everybody knows, may be threatening us, but it is an ultimate weapon and it is an ultimate destruction, and we want to avoid it if at all possible.
Thank you. If I may come in, I think what's more likely than a general strike, which I would oppose on principle, I think, is there could be a rolling confrontation. Something will trigger something, and something else will trigger something else. I think that's much more likely, because there are people who, don't forget, Father Roberts, who would like to see it happen for reasons other than social credit opposition.
I know that, Jack. We discussed this at our Solidarity Coalition meetings, and we agonize over it, and we try to take every precaution that we possibly can to be free, democratic, and express our opposition to the government while at the same time keeping within the law.
Because there is no dictatorship, really.
But what my opinion is this, and I've told this to the Premier, that I believe while he does have a legal mandate to govern, there's no question about that, he is beginning to lose his moral mandate. And I believe that many thousands, tens of thousands of British Columbians are recognizing that the government has lost its moral sense. It's turning in violence in some way upon its own people.
Gentlemen, would you go that far?
I would go so far to say that we have at the moment a democratic tyranny. And those are contradictions in terms, but I think that's where we're at. We're in a contradictory. We have a democratic tyranny.
Well, I mean, the parliamentary system works only if you have a reasoned consensus among a reasonable cabinet dealing with a reasonably well-informed and active opposition. Otherwise, as you well know, the British system can become, under a strong Prime Minister, a dictatorship. Right?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, ministers, I think a lot of people are partisan, either right or left, and there's not much scientific methods being used here. I think that if you had a way, like Bill Bennett has issued a BC development bond, which pays so much interest to the people back. Now, why can't he issue a recession bond that pays the interest going? Those people issue it in $100, $500, and $1,000 bonds.
Sir, I'm grateful for your call, but you're on an angle which I'm not prepared to enter into discussion this morning. You're talking about a specific economic measure. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask Father Roberts a question. You know, when he talks about, well, I know what the government is planning to do to the handicapped and taking their $50 away, but he talks about the seniors, how the seniors will be affected. I'd like to know in what programs will be taken away from the seniors.
Well, for example, the abolition of the rentalsman's office is one thing that is very detrimental to seniors. We have seniors at every one of our rallies, and this is one of the big things they come up with. They are afraid. Older people often are afraid to speak out for their rights.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And they also lost, I believe, one of the grants. No, SAFER is still there, isn't it?
That SAFER is still
Shelter
there.
Aid for Early. No, that's a good point, because I can't understand why the devil he didn't keep the mediation section of the rentalsman.
Yeah, well, you see, the point is, I think, as Bob was making, that the budget and the accompanying legislation is not so much one of restraint. We would be for a reasonable restraint, but it is a political and ideological view of society which radically alters many of the support systems that have been built into our British Columbia society. So it's the Premier and his people who are the extremists and the radicals and the revolutionaries. We are the conservatives.
But let me put my hat on again. We haven't got the money. We're down $1.6 billion or $1.7 billion.
It's a question of priorities,
Well,
Jack.
it's a question also of cooperation, because we've had services with seniors and handicapped that volunteers and community have helped to undertake with the government. The government has pulled out from those programs. And without a three-way thing, they just fall apart.
Doesn't work. Doesn't work.
No.
Go ahead, please. Oh, sorry, which one? Go ahead.
Jack.
That's you. Go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing?
Fair to poor.
I'd just like to address these three gentlemen. I may be a little bit extreme. I'm 20 years old. I'm a Christian. I just feel that when the politics start to get mixed with religion, and you look all over the world, the Pope is involved with religion. He's over there in Poland with Solidarity. It's all a sign of the last days, and I believe that we're in hands of Satan right now.
Okay. Hands of Satan right now. He doesn't want clergymen to be involved in politics.
Okay, I think that this is an age-old struggle. I was looking up something that Kaiser Wilhelm said in 1896, that pastors should confine themselves to the souls of their parishioners, should promote charity, and should leave politics alone. And there's nothing new in this at all. And whenever the church has been involved with people, it has been involved inevitably with politics. You never would say that Jesus was uninvolved with people. You never would say that Jesus ignored the power structures of the day. He addressed them.
Back to my days as a kid reporter in the Sons of Glasgow, we had a party called Christian Communists. We had, we used to preach in the back of a truck.
There are also some evangelical agnostics. There's such a group, I'm told.
No, but you see, Jack, the point here, I think Bob is making
Yeah, I
it
know,
very
I get
well.
the point, really.
But not to take a stand, as Archbishop Camara of Recife, Brazil says, not to take a stand is in effect to take a stand, to be politically supporting the status quo. So if you don't open your mouth and open your mind and take positions on these basic human matters, then in effect you are supporting an undemocratic government.
Dare I ask you, Father Roberts? Of course I dare. Have you had any heat from your hierarchy because of your political approach?
In this present
Yes.
situation? Absolutely none.
Good.
Absolutely none. In fact, Bishop Duro of Victoria, my friend, we are in some way cohorts in these
Right.
matters. And so that's the answer to that question.
That's good to hear, isn't it? Go ahead because there was a time when pressure would have been exerted.
Yes, I suppose, but I've always told the current Archbishop that if he has any problems with me, I'd be glad to meet with him or his representatives at any time.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Jack. Well, I'm just going to say that I wouldn't want to attend any of their churches to be heard more politics and squabbling about politics. We don't go to church for that, and I want to go to church and hear God's word and come away feeling that my soul has been fed something in this evil world. This political business, I think it's an abomination. And they should get out of the church and get into politics. Every single one of them.
Well, it'd be difficult to read the Bible and have your scripture readings without reading Jesus' comments about being concerned for the widow and the orphan and those who are without food, of going the second mile, of giving a glass of water to the children, and all of those have become political acts.
Well, I think that there's a legitimate concern that if somebody comes to Mass every Sunday or to the service at one of our churches and hears a political diatribe day after day, that they would be quite right in saying this is not what we're about. What we are about, it seems to me, is a holistic understanding of the human being, and it is impossible to neglect the social dimension. I expect that when people come to worship at our church, that they will be able to worship, but that in the process of worshiping God, they will hear the Word of God and they will be stretched. What we're talking about is a kind of fitness. And if you're going to be fit in the spiritual sense, you must be stretched, you must experience pain, you must grow. There's no other way. Otherwise, you're flabby. Otherwise, you just sit around and veg, and churches end up suffering from what one person has described as terminal niceness.
Now, I would agree here, and again, I'd go back to that great man, Nobel Peace Prize possibility, Archbishop Camara, and he says, speaking against people who consider only the soul and forget the body, they forget the wholeness of human beings, he says, I want to send men to heaven, not sheep, and certainly not sheep with their stomachs empty and their testicles crushed. I align myself with him.
It's a good quote. Gentlemen, I'm grateful for your presence. I'm going to do a free-for-all by myself for the last segment of the program this morning in case anybody wants to get at me, which is not unusual.
Thank you for
let
dealing
me
honestly and openly.
reintroduce my guests of the leave. Val Anderson, Grace Memorial United Church, editor of the Canadian Ecumenical News. Did your insurance not cover the damage?
80% of it.
So you've got to raise 20% or build a smaller church.
That's right.
Bob Smith of the United Church Shaughnessy, and Father Jim Roberts. What do you teach at Langara? Religion, of course.
Asian and Western religions and the Latin language.
Amo mas I love a lot, amamus amatus amant. Hey?
Great.
Didn't forget, you see. And I only went to an elementary and secondary school in
that was the old country, Jack.
They beat it into you. And spokesman for Solidarity. My thanks to you, gentlemen. I hope we don't come to civil disobedience. I certainly pray we don't come to a general strike. I hope Bill Bennett wakens up one of these days and listens to what's going on around him in this province. My thanks, gentlemen. I'll be back with a free-for-all after the break. I've just did my first quick read of the regulations under Bill 3, and it would seem that if you're on the chopping block, if you're on one of the hit lists in Victoria and you get chopped, if you take your money and run, you get 2 weeks' pay for each year of service. If you want to go on a recall list, you'll only get half of that. Is that right? No. Am I wrong? No. That's why Cliff Anstein's going to be on tomorrow morning. Oh, I'm thrown. I think I am right. Just a minute. The right of an employee to compensation provided under subsection 1 ceases in the day 12 months after the employer's employee first had the right to terminate. It seems that seniority certainly is going to apply in specific groups not yet delineated. Not the head, not yet delineated, and that there will be no seniority in the terms of the old understanding in the way of bumping, jumping, and moving around. But if you go on the recall list, you'll stay on the recall list for a month, and you might get recalled to a job, and I think I'm still right. We'll check it with Anstein and Chabot, that you get less severance pay if you go on the recall list than if you don't. I'm sure I'm right. So what's what? Oh, I was doing a free-for-all. I thought it was the end of the program. Go ahead, please. Well, you see, that's one of the problems. I've been trying to get the detailed explanation of 3 since I came back on the air on the 6th of September. And it's my duty to try and give lucid explanations of these complex, radical bills. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to that, direct my attention to the man from the Grace Church.
He's gone.
He's gone?
Yep.
Oh, well, just can I say a word?
Sure.
I think it's a shame. I go along the Main Street bus when they used to hand it out at Grace Church up there, you know, at Fraser there. And you see all the fellas coming down every Wednesday with bags of groceries. And now it's the same thing up here at Burrard and Nelson. All these fellas down here, I've been in the odd hotel downtown having a drink, and they all brag how they get a woman on a Wednesday and go up there and get a bag of groceries to save their money for booze. And this is going on in all those cheap rooming houses down there. You can see them going up every Wednesday, hundreds of them. And
Somebody's
I think it's
probably
depriving the woman with kids that really needs it out of food.
Yeah.
And I think that anything north of the CN station, they should not be allowed to have a bag of food unless it's for a family, because they're just making a racket out of it, Jack.
Well, you could be right. I don't know. I can't endorse it, but that would certainly create a class line.
Yeah.
North of the CN station, no handouts. Don't know about that. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I remember last time Father Roberts was on your show, and he was talking about the
Father
human
Roberts
resources
has not
being
been on my
savaged. Well, in the budget I have before me, it says the increase in human resources is 13.9%, so I don't know where he gets the savaging from. And I'm also wondering about these 3 people that you had on your program this morning. They seem to misunderstand of how the government will tackle this problem of deficit. They have 1.6 billion this year. Next year it'll be over 2 billion, and if things aren't done, within a 3-year period, we'd have a $4 billion deficit if it's not tackled.
I've said all the way through that the aims and objects of the social credit government appear to be proper. There's been still a complete lack of explanation. The behaviour in the House is very hard to take on both sides of the House, and the lack of knowledge of the public is immense, except that we do know that inconsiderate things like wiping out the whole of the rentals man instead of keeping the mediation commission, on this Gandhi dancing on human rights, which was a question not of law but of administration, and cutting out the $50 CIP grants, which is downright stupid in my opinion. So don't let's get confused with the aims and objects and the way things are being done. Colette, after the break.